to derive the quadratic formula means to start with our standard form equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and end up with the quadratic formula that you guys know and love, x equals the opposite of b plus or minus, and so on. So to do that, we're actually going to need to complete the square, and this can be a bit of a challenging process, but it's also kind of a fun process, I think. So let's take a look at how this works. So we always want to start our completing the square method with an a value of 1, and so in this case we don't have it. So to start out, we're going to again follow the steps we've done before. In this case, divide every single term by a, including the 0. So when I do this, I end up with a new equation of x squared plus b over a times x plus c over a equal to 0. Okay. Next up, we always wanted to separate our x terms from our constants. So again, just stick with what we know. We just have variables we're working with instead of numbers, which makes it a lot more tricky. So x squared plus b over ax plus blank, I'm going to move the c over a to the other side. So negative c divided by a, and also plus blank. So at this point we need our first of two little side notes. So what I need to do first off to the side is find the magic number. So the magic number works by taking half of the b value. So normally we just did our b value divided by 2, but in this case our b value is actually b over a. So I'm going to take half of that by multiplying it by a half. And then remember, squaring that answer. So multiplying b over a times a half gets me b over 2a. I'm going to multiply straight across, and then I still need to square that to find my magic number. So when you square a fraction, it means multiply the top by itself. So b times b gets you b squared, and multiply the bottom by itself. 2a times 2a is 4a squared. So there's my magic number, remember the first of two side notes. So let's take that magic number back into our equation. So I'm going to add that to both sides. So b squared over 4a squared. And then same thing on the other side, so b squared over 4a squared. Okay? The reason that that number was magical is because it allows me to factor. And so what I'll do is factor the left-hand side of this equation. I have no idea what multiplies to the last term into the middle, but that's why we were using that trick before. We know that it's always going to be what I got after I divided by 2, but before I squared it. So in parentheses, I'm going to have x plus b over 2a squared. That's what it meant to complete the square. And on the other side, well, I need to add these two fractions together. So at this point, it's time for our second of the side notes. And this one's a bit tricky, especially if you don't like working with fractions. So what I need to add together are negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. Well, in order to add fractions together, you may recall from elementary school, you need a least common denominator. I need to make both denominators the same thing, and in this case, my least common denominator is going to be 4a squared. Okay? So what I need to do is make that first denominator 4a squared. To do that, I'll have to multiply it by 4a. And whenever you multiply to the bottom, you need to multiply to the top as well. So this new term is going to be negative 4ac, starting to see some familiar things about the quadratic formula, times or over 4a squared. And that's the same thing as negative c over a. If I were to simplify it, the 4a's would all cross out, and I'd have just negative c over a. And then plus b squared over 4a squared. And now that I have common denominators, now I can go ahead and add simply by adding straight across. So let's go back to our main problem, and I'm going to write that as negative 4ac plus b squared, and the whole thing is divided by 4a squared. Are you having fun yet? Let's go ahead and start to wrap this up. At this point, I want to take the square root of both sides, as we've always done. So I'm going to take the square root, and remember, I'm going to, for the fraction piece, I have plus or minus. I'm going to do the square root of the numerator and the square root of the denominator. Okay? If we simplify a few things, I'm left with x plus b over 2a is equal to, now that numerator is not going to be able to be simplified, so the numerator is simply going to be plus or minus the square root of. Let's switch the order, so it's in the order we're used to seeing. Usually we see b squared in front and then minus 4ac. I just simply switch the order. And then for your denominator, the square root of 4a squared is just a regular 2 times a. The square root of 4 is 2, the square root of a squared is a. To finish this problem and then to wrap this up, I'm going to have to subtract this term to move it to the other side. So that's going to become a negative b, or opposite of b we would say, over 2a, and then plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a, and then to make it look exactly like the quadratic formula, I notice I do have a common denominator, so I'll finish this by making one fraction, which is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. The whole thing is divided by 2a. And there, my friends, is where the quadratic formula comes from. Fun, right?